Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me this hour. We're going to spend some time talking about an organization we have featured many times over the years, an organization I think so highly of. It's called Forward Women, and we'll talk more about what is available. We have a link on the website. We want to alert you to the fact that this outstanding gala is taking place this weekend, March 2nd. We're going to have a chance to talk in studio with one individual that is with the organization, another individual that we will be talking with by phone, who is the author of this new book called Fully Human, and also one of the speakers at the gala. Let me first of all go to Pam Johnson in studio with us. She's the Chief Operating Officer for Forward, and this is an organization that we have talked about many times before with Diane Pattison and other guests as well. And she has had it before working there, a career with Nike and Foot Locker, also had financial positions with Mentor Graphics, U.S. Bank, and United Technologies. And Pam, it's just great to have you in studio with us today.
Thanks, Kerby. I'm happy to be here.
We're going to talk about the gala and the mentoring program and some of that in just a minute. But let me also, before I go any further, also introduce Susan Packard. Now, you may know her as the co-founder of HDTV, but let me just mention she grew up in the Detroit area. By the way, Pam grew up in Oregon. We have some connections there. We'll get to that later. One of a number of kids of first-generation Italian and Greek grandparents. May know her earlier book, New Rules of the Game, but the book that we're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about a little bit later in the broadcast is called Fully Human, 3 Steps to Grow Your Emotional Fitness in Work, Leadership, and Life. So, Susan, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you for having me, and hello, Pam.
Hello, Susan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We're going to get everybody together this weekend at the gala, and so we might talk about that in just a minute. But, Pam, I know that people kind of tune in and tune out, even though we have tried to feature Forward Women for years. I suspect a few people would like to say, okay, what is this organization exactly that we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, great. Great question, Kerby. So Forward was founded in 2011 by Diane Pattison, who is a fellow Oregonian,
yes,
fellow classmate of mine at Oregon State. Diane, in 2011, wrote a book called Work, Love, Pray, and the book gave a voice to women of faith who represent a growing share of the full-time workforce. And what Work, Love, Pray did, it allowed Diane to cast a vision while laying out the foundation for Forward. So Forward is the only national and global organization serving Christian women in the workplace. And just real quick, I thought I would go over just our vision, our mission,
please do,
our values and strategies for those listeners that aren't familiar with Forward. So our vision at Forward really is to build a global community of Christian women in the workplace. And our mission is we help women in the workplace reach their God-given potential with confidence, so they will share Christ's love. Our values are real, passionate, faithful community, and our strategy is that we connect women through our digital community, our local groups, our mentor programs, and through individuals, churches, and corporations. And it's an organization that I've been associated with for going on 4 years, 3.5 years as a board member, 8 days as an employee. And I am just thrilled to be able to talk about Forward today.
I might just mention that as you click on the picture there of Pam Johnson, it will take you to forwardwomen.org, and it's the number 4. And I'll start calling it Forward, but I always put the women in there because people always want to find the website, but we do have that link there as well. Susan, I saw a video where you were saying how excited you are to be involved in this gala, which takes place this weekend. We haven't talked about it much, but give us a little bit more of your background because you've decided to work with this organization at least this weekend, and what are your thoughts?
Right. Well, yes. So I met Diane last fall, and I met her via an old friendship, actually between my husband and her husband. And long story short, we got connected, and I was just so impressed with her comfort in talking about her spiritual life. And I thought to myself, there really isn't any place that women can comfortably, I mean, you can't do it in the office comfortably, right? Because people don't want to, you find some friends in the office where you can talk about your faith, but often it's one of those things that you look for places and organizations, and women especially, because women are connectors. And, Forward, just the whole idea of it really impressed me.
Well, again, I've known Diane Pattison for some time, and this is a woman who's a force of nature for sure. But again, I remember the first time we were just talking to her about her book and about this vision. I thought this is something that has been needed for some time. Mm-hmm. And let me just for a minute say to our listeners, some of you might say, well, okay, I'm not a woman in the workforce, so I'll listen, but I really don't have much that I can do. Yes, you do. Recognize that some of the women that need to hear about this program right this hour aren't probably listening because they're probably in the workforce. And so here is an opportunity with what we have posted on the website for you to pass some of that on to them. And so I'm going to give you some suggestions how to do so. And one of those is because this gala is coming together, let's, if we can, for just a few minutes, Pam, talk about this, because we'll have Susan Packard, we'll have Laura Tucker. If you're not familiar with her, one of the design leads for Magnolia Homes. You have a variety of other individuals I want you to talk about. And so this is an opportunity for you maybe to say, I heard about this organization on the program Point of View, and this would be something you'd really want to attend this Saturday. So talk about what is happening at the gala.
Yeah, thanks, Kerby. We are so excited for the upcoming gala this coming Saturday at the Renaissance Hotel. It's our 4th annual gala, and they just continue to become more and more exciting, more entertaining, and this one is definitely has the cherry on top. So next year, I guess there'll be 2 cherries on top, but it's going to be at the Renaissance Hotel. We are so blessed to have Susan and Laura be our co-presenters.
Yes.
We have a very exciting lineup, Kerby, of a live auction, which has amazing auction items that have been donated from people all over the country. We have tours of the Nike headquarters in Portland. We have tours of Amazon in Seattle, African safaris. We've got a big board, gift grab, wonderful silent auction packages. I think that we're looking at maybe 50 to 60 silent auction packages. Entertainment. We have Bernice Washington saying an amazing opening prayer for us, which if you haven't heard Bernice, she's amazing. So we're really excited. If anyone out there is interested, you can go to our website, forwardwomen.org, and you can see all the information about the upcoming gala on Saturday. And we would love to see you there. And we're looking forward to for God to show up in amazing ways.
I might just mention, too, when you go there, you can already do a couple of things that I would recommend. And since we're coming to a break, let me give that, and we'll come back and talk with Susan. And that is you have a video both from Susan and Laura, and you can watch the video. Susan's, for example, is really just about 40 seconds, and the other one's about the same amount of time. But there's a share button in the upper right-hand corner. Now, here's the first action item for you. I would encourage you, after you watch that, hit that share button and send it to someone that might be interested in the gala, might be interested in something happening at Forward. And so there's one action item. I have a lot more coming up, but I have a break, so I'll come back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Alex Berenson is a journalist who tended to be a libertarian when it came to drugs, but a conversation with his wife changed his perspective. She worked as a senior psychiatrist at the institution housing people diagnosed with psychotic disorders, like schizophrenia. She mentioned in passing that, of course, a patient had been smoking pot all his life. He asked why she said, of course, only to find out that all of them smoke marijuana and that he should check it out. He did. The medical literature is replete with links between marijuana, mental illness, and even violence. But you would never have heard that. Berenson says he has never seen a story where the gap between insider and outsider knowledge was so great or the stakes so high. At a time when most states are legalizing marijuana use, medical professionals are finding greater dangers with increased marijuana use. In his article and radio interview, he cited medical literature that challenges many of the myths perpetuated by advocates of medical marijuana and marijuana legalization. We're told that marijuana has many different medical uses. Actually, it's been shown to work in just a few narrow conditions. And we're also told that it's very effective for pain relief, yet it does not seem to be the case. As I've mentioned in previous commentaries, the National Academy of Medicine found that cannabis use is likely to increase the risk of developing schizophrenia and other psychoses. The higher the use, the greater the risk. Berenson then explains how this can lead to more violence. Most schizophrenics are not violent, but the latest medical literature has found that 1% of them are more violent. These are the scientific facts that deserve our attention, especially as other states consider drug legalization. I'm Kerby Anderson. And that's my point of view.
From roadside attractions, Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question. Run the Race, rated PG, now playing.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Privileged to have in studio with us today Pam Johnson, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Forward, and then also by phone Susan Packard, who, of course, you know from HDTV and a variety of other things, but you're very quickly going to know her for another thing. And Pam, you and I were talking off air about this book by Susan Packard, and so I thought we might talk about this for a few minutes, Susan, if you don't mind, because I remember about 2 decades ago, somebody handed me a copy of Daniel Goldman's book, Emotional Intelligence, and I remember how significant that was. And then sometimes people even say that they think I have a lot of emotional intelligence, and I won't believe them that much, but I'll take that for a compliment for the moment. But you've really taken this idea of a book that was really came out about a quarter of a century ago and added to this idea of emotional intelligence to really talk about emotional fitness. And I went through every one of the 250 pages here and wished I had more time to dip in longer, but I'll do that after the program. But I was struck by the fact that you really say that there are kind of 3 steps: willingness, trust, and principles. And I'll admit that sometimes when you have a book written by somebody in the business world, you figure it's all about business. But this one really is also about self-improvement and psychology, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. And you know, a lot of this is from my experience in working myself in the workplace and, you know, mentoring a lot of people in the workplace, and just seeing what that, when, you know, you go to work, you're often in a situation where you're bringing unsettled emotions and feelings, whether it's something that happened that morning, you find out that your child may be failing an algebra class, or, it could be something more significant. And it's impossible not to bring these feelings into the workplace. And this was the one area where I thought, Goleman's work was brilliant. But this one area, especially today, as we're seeing what's going on with, the mass shootings and people's feelings of loneliness and whatnot, that I thought we needed to address those emotions as well as all the good, positive, productive emotions that we want to bring into the workplace so that we can be successful and happy. So I took a little bit of a step back from his idea to actually modernize it for today, and looking at this idea of willingness, which is the first step, and that's willingness to, look under the hood a little bit at your life, to gain some self-awareness, and to understand better, and to do it all with self-compassion, which is something that isn't talked about much in the workplace.
That's for sure. Let me just mention the book just came out a couple of weeks ago. You should be able to find it in your local bookstore, but we also have a link so that you can get it either in hardback or Kindle. I might just mention real quickly, Pam, as I understand, if you come to the Gala, you get one of the books there, don't you?
Yes, sir.
So that'll be kind of fun. So let me, if you don't mind, Susan, kind of work our way through a little bit of the book before we get back to Forward. Is that okay? Because
sure,
I would love to talk about the 3 steps. Let's take the first one, and that is develop a willingness to do some self-discovery, to identify, understand, confront, and dispel unprotective emotions. Now, it's interesting. This wasn't intended, but it came together because next hour I'm talking with Jon Gordon about the power of a positive team. So we're going to talk about positivity and things like that. So
wonderful.
This is going to be a 1-2 punch, really. But there is a real need, and I'll use my oldest daughter, who's a super saleswoman, as an example. She came to realize that there were some things that would be helpful in terms of her own self-development and self-discovery. And sometimes we're afraid to do a little bit of that psychological archaeology, if you will. And yet that's really what the whole first section of your book is all about, isn't it?
It really is, Kerby. It's all about that. And, the idea behind it is this is a leadership book, but I think about leadership in a little bit of a different way. I think that you first start with being the leader of your own life. And to be the leader of your own life means that you understand what your principles are, what's important to you, how you're going to stand with other people, all of those things. And so if you want to be a leader of teams of people, you first have to be the leader of your own life. And self-awareness is an enormous part of that process. So I offer, a number of different ways and tools to help people so that they can gain that and feel that they're in a much stronger place when they get into the workplace.
And I might just mention, too, that there is no way I could even possibly, if we gave you an hour or 2 hours to cover all this, because some of the most helpful things in your book are diagrams. And since this is radio, you couldn't see all the diagrams, but that really is a very substantial section of the book. But just to keep the train moving down the road, let's talk about the second one, and that's trust. Deploy emotional intelligence to build authentic relationships of trust. And in there, you talk really about the fact that trust is difficult for a lot of individuals because of their family of origin, because of the difficulties they've had in their career. And so you really spend some time really helping us understand what this idea of trust is all about, too, don't you?
Yes, and truthfully, I came to realize and feel today that trust is the most powerful emotion in the workplace because it allows you to move quickly, with speed, with focus, and it leaves out all those, kind of messy human dramas that can creep into the workplace. And I learned that in my job at HGTV from a group of guys. And, I was 39 years old, and I had come into that job, and I was playing a very senior role at HGTV, and I'd come into that job with very little trust of people because I'd had a history, some experience with people, which we all do, that were not trustworthy. And just the dynamic of our having each other's backs and really supporting one another, I believe. And then that, when you're the leadership team, that carries down into the organization, and they see that. And so trust was an enormous part of why we were as successful as we were at HGTV.
Sure. Trusting that somebody has your back, trusting that when you delegate something, that they will do it. And it's not just what you expect, but what you inspect. We understand all of that, but nevertheless, those are some very important principles. But the third one, which is kind of the end of the book, embracing the we principles to create as a leader or an employee to really kind of have this collaborative workplace culture, because anything of significance isn't going to be something that you do by yourself. It's going to be part of a team. We'll be talking about that next hour with Jon Gordon and his power of a positive team. But it, again, comes together to that third and final principle of developing what you call emotional fitness.
Yes, and we principles really are the spiritual dimension of ourselves. And, my experience in many organizations is that it's either the least evolved part of ourselves or it's the least shown part of ourselves. And so what we tried to do at HGTV is we tried to live with we principles, again, modeling for the organization as best we could. No one is ever perfect with these things, but having this balance of power with purpose, ego with grace, head and heart, these two things coming together so that you can connect with other people and you can show compassion and you can do the things that you feel are part of your humanity, and I worry today about workplaces that are so dominated by technology. I love technology, don't get me wrong, but we also have to have gathering places. We have to build community in the workplace.
Well said.
So,
well, I need to take a break, but just before we do so, let me just mention we have a link to your website, SusanPackard.com, and don't even have to remember how to spell it all, or if you're driving right now, you'll find it. First of all, there's a way in which you can get a copy of the book. There is a video there, but I might also mention there's a quiz to see how emotionally fit you are. So again, just as we are sending you to Forward, I also wanted to send some of you to SusanPackard.com, and those links are on our website. So really all you need to remember is pointofview.net, and that will give you information about both of my guests this hour. And when we come back from the break, Pam, let me come to you. I want to talk about the mentoring program. I have always been so impressed with the mentoring program, and the mentor program has been one where we've even had sometimes when we've done interviews, had people call in and say, I was a mentor or I was a mentee or whatever. I guess I can open the phones if we want to get a comment or two. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. I don't want to take away too much time from these two smart women, but if you have a comment or a testimony, we might hear it. But otherwise, just sit back and pay attention. And most importantly, I hope that some of you will pass this on. You may know a young professional that would benefit tremendously from being mentored by some of these professional women. And if you know those individuals, you need to send them a copy of this. We have a watch and listen button on our Point of View website. Of course, we also broadcast on Facebook Live. So somewhere or another, you can get that to the individuals that need to know about it. Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Pam Johnson in studio and Susan Packard by phone. And I might just mention a lot of this ties into Forward. You can go to forwardwomen.org, but you don't even have to remember all of that because we simply have a link there as well. As you land there, you can sign up for a newsletter. You can find out more about the Gala taking place this weekend, March 2nd, Divine Design. You can also find out about the mentoring program, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. And there are a number of videos for you to watch, which I, again, would encourage you maybe to pick out one, hit that share button, put it on your Facebook page, maybe use it as a Twitter feed, or maybe send it to somebody. Some of you might be moms that say, my working daughter would really benefit from this right now. Some of you might say, my sister would be really interested in this. And so the fact that you're listening to this, and it may or may not apply to you, you certainly know in your sphere of influence probably a number of working women, professional women that would benefit from all of this. So again, simply go to Forward to find out more about connecting, leading, and supporting women in the workplace so that they can really reach their God-given potential. We're going to talk about mentoring, but I thought, Susan, I'd come to you before I go to Pam. Mentoring is so important. And again, one of the reasons why I appreciate Diane is, you look for, if you're really rising in the corporate structure, somebody that's maybe ahead of the game that can give you some advice. Has there ever been a time when you've had somebody mentor you, or sometime when you've been able to mentor someone else?
Oh, I think that even today, Diane is mentoring me. I think this is about being open to new learning, new ways of improving yourself, all of your, every part of yourself, including your spiritual part. And in the workplace, I didn't have the benefit of women. I was in cable television, which is a very male-dominated field. Mm-hmm. But so I didn't have that benefit, but I did have several men who mentored me at work and taught me the technical aspects of what I needed to do, and then I sort of ran with it from there. But yes, mentoring, and I love Forward's mentoring program on so many levels. I mean, this is a place where two women who do feel strongly about their faith can talk about that, and and the confidence that they place in one another. So I know Pam will talk more about that.
Well, we're going to let Pam do so. And again, you've already heard how enthusiastic I have been about the program. And we've, in the past, sometimes even had people call in with their positive experiences. But let's see if we can sign some people up. What's the mentoring program all about?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you, Susan, for your kind words of encouragement for our mentor program, and Kerby for yours as well. And I will just say what's interesting, after being at this organization for close to 4 years and being the mom of a 23-year-old, it's taken me 4 years to convince her that she needs a mentor. And just last month, she finally relegated and agreed. So
That's
I think
good.
she's going to be one of our next mentor or mentees.
Well, and nobody's more intelligent, more confident, and more ready to meet the world than either a high school graduate or a college graduate. So it takes a while for them to say, maybe I do need some help. So what does the program entail?
Great. So we have a great mentor program where we have matched over 400 mentor-mentees since its inception. We have over 160 wonderful, amazing mentors that are ready to go at any time. And then what we do, Kerby, is we run a 10-week session 3 times a year where we pair mentors and mentees together. We have an amazing program manager, Trina Lee, a Cornell graduate. She has a heart for women and has for most of her life. She runs a program management organization called New Life Ministries, where she transforms lives in Uganda. So it's just a real heart for women. So every 3 times a year, she matches over 33. We have 33 mentor-mentee matches per session. And what we do is these mentor-mentees match up for 10 weeks, and they have 6 sessions for the 10-week period. And the mentors offer guidance on work-life balance, career advancement, goal setting, connecting gifts and purpose, personal relationships, and integrating faith and work and life. And we have kicked off a outcome study where we've interviewed several women, both mentors and mentees, and we've interviewed them in areas of like career advancement, professional development, perseverance, work relationships, God's guidance, and we have found the outcomes of their professional walk before and after the mentor program. And in all cases, as you can only imagine, when you're in community with faithful women that care for each other, the results of the outcome study is just, it's overwhelming, where it's like 100% of the mentor-mentee matches show that mentors are absolutely critical to a young woman's life. So we're really excited about the program. We have a great structured program that we do, and I'll just run through real quick some of the components of the program for some of the women that are listening. And actually, if you don't have a mentor and you want one, you can already start to put together some information on your background so that when you do connect with someone, you'll already be prepared. So what we do is we start with a wonderful kickoff call where we introduce all of the mentors and mentees. We have a pre-session call where the mentor and the mentee, they discuss their communication preferences, they set their meeting schedule, they review expectations, and then they sign a contract that they will hold each other accountable. In our first session, we have a goal worksheet where the mentee lays out what their goals and expectations are for the 10-week session. Mm-hmm. And then during the second and third and fourth to fifth session, the mentee and mentors, they get together and they work on those goals and have critical action steps. Mm-hmm. And then what's really probably the most rewarding is at the very end of the session, we invite all the mentors and mentees to get on a phone together, and then we hear the wonderful celebration that God has provided for those outcomes. So I really can't say enough about the program. We would invite anyone to the website to research more about our program. We're always only a phone call away if anyone has any questions. And I think just the last thing that I thought was very inspirational to share, we all have our favorite devotions, and I'm an ex-California gal and was fortunate enough to attend Rick Warren's church for quite a while at Saddleback. And he has a wonderful devotion that he talks about the 4 different types of people that you need in your life. And I just thought I would read this real quickly because I think it really speaks to how it's important for all of us to reach out to other people in our life to get feedback and opinion. So this one devotion that I love, it says, "You and I can never be the kind of people God wants us to be on our own. We were never intended to be. We all need people who are teaching us, sharing their lives with us, investing us, and encouraging us to grow. The Bible says, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. In fact, to be all that God calls you to be, you need to learn from at least 4 different kinds of people. The first one that he speaks about, Kerby, is mentors. That's number 1 on his list.
Isn't that good?
These are your coaches. He says, I've had 9 different mentors in my life. No one can teach you everything you need to know. One person will teach you in another area, another will teach you about something else. So I think, and if you know Diane, you know her heart, you know her passion. If you've read her book, mentorship is the cornerstone of what she believes in. So we are very proud of our program and look forward to connecting with any of your listeners soon.
Susan, let me come to you for just a minute. I don't know of any other organization that is doing this as extensively as Forward, and I just think, again, if mentors are important, this is a place where certainly a number of professional women need to sign up, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things that are unique about Forward Women, and this is one of them. Now, there are mentoring programs, in other organizations, and there are, mentoring programs in companies.
Sure.
The problem with I've run a number of them in companies, and the honesty is what's needed. You really need, both of you need to be honest with one another. And in companies, it feels like there's a lot of other agendas that get in the way of that honesty.
Sure.
So that's another thing about Forward's mentoring program, and knowing Diane as I do, this is a very important part of it. You're not going to grow unless somebody shares all of your good, but also all the areas where you do need to continue to develop. We need to develop until we're in the dirt. We need to keep developing.
I would agree, and I need to take a break, but I'm going to come back. I want to get a few more comments from you, Susan, about what you'll be saying at the gala, and we certainly have a lot more to cover, but we also have another one of those mandatory breaks. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Riley Bembry returned from World War I, a changed man. Upon his return, this former Army medic settled in Los Angeles and became a butcher. But the city could not contain him, and he headed into the Mojave Desert and became a prospector. By the time the Great Depression gripped the nation, other veterans of the Great War had found their way to Bembry's cabin, each seeking to escape the emotional and physical scars left from the war. Together in 1934, they erected a simple 7-foot monument atop a rocky outcropping not far from Bembry's cabin, but miles and miles from anything else. They chose a common symbol to honor war dead, a white cross, and dedicated it to honor the dead of all wars. When Bembry died in 1984, Henry Sandoz, Bembry's close friend, began to care for the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial Cross. In 2001, someone sued. A judge would eventually order the memorial hidden from view, literally covered with a padlocked bag, while the case was decided. First Liberty had the privilege of working with Henry Sandoz, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and others to defend that memorial. Before he was senator, Ted Cruz volunteered his time as lead counsel on the case. Because of Henry Sandoz, Ted Cruz, Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and First Liberty, that memorial still stands today just where Bembry placed it in honor of the dead of all wars. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, just for a few more minutes, and again, this could go on for hours, but again, we have some other things we'll be talking about the next hour. Susan Packard, let me come to you for just a minute before I come back to Pam Johnson, and that is, some people might say, okay, she's going to be speaking at this gala on Saturday, Divine Design. Can we get a little bit of a preview on what we're going to hear from Susan Packard Sunday or Saturday?
Sure. Diane had asked me to talk in a little more detail about We Principles, the step 3, and
yes.
And so I'll be spending some time on that. I have a chapter in the book which is focused on how we can better manage our ego and pride, which are parts that can rear up and keep us focused on self instead of We Principles, which the whole idea behind We Principles is moving from me to we and looking at your workplace and your community that way. So I'm going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about some ways, some tools that people can use to help them to refine their, how they, how they live and lead, and how they can better use the WE principles, tools like gratitude and purpose, and how we can incorporate those even into our work lives.
So again, just a lot of great resources. If you go to the Gala, of course, you'll get a copy of the book Fully Human, but some people might say, well, I won't be able to make it, or I'm a man and I'm probably not going to go to the Gala, but I'd like to read the book. Well, again, you can find it in your local bookstore, but we have a link to SusanPackard.com. And Susan, one of the things I like is that not only do you have an opportunity to order the book there, of course, we also have a link so you can get it in hardback or Kindle, but you even have a place where people can actually take a test. And I think that's really creative because a lot of people might say, yeah, I'd kind of like to see that. So you've got, Are You Emotionally Fit? And if you click on that, it begins to ask you a series of questions about things like self-awareness and openness to trust and self-transcendence and all the things you're talking about. So it's kind of one-stop shopping. And I would encourage people, in addition to going to Forward, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, to go to your website as well. So I really appreciate you giving us some time today to talk about this, and looking forward to what you'll be sharing on Saturday.
Thank you so much, Percy.
Let's, if we can, just for a minute, Pam, just before we're out of time, mention a couple of things. First of all, we mentioned mentoring, but you have a corporate mentoring program too, isn't that correct?
We do, yeah. And I think
we didn't mention that.
Susan brought up a really good point that it's hard in corporations. They don't have a lot of structured mentor programs. What we have done is we have gone into corporations and offered our structure, our mentor program, our back-end logistics to the corporations and companies. And we had our first company sign up. So now we have 10 of our more high-touch mentors, if you will, that are partnering with 10 of the mentees at their company. And we're excited to continue to roll our corporate mentor program out. So again, very, very excited for that. But one thing I do have to tell you, Susan, as soon as I get off the radio program, I'm going to log on and I'm going to take the test. So then we'll have something to talk about on Saturday night.
That's good.
I can't wait.
Good. Well, Susan, I'll let you go. I know that you have some things to do. And when we come back, we've got just another couple minutes here, and I'm going to spend some time with Pam talking about all the details. And the first one, Pam, is if people want to attend the Gala, there is a link to, of course, forwardwomen.org. And if you go there, there's a place where you can get tickets. And then if you can get tickets, there's a reception, there's a silent auction, there is a live auction. So by getting the ticket, it opens up more than just hearing a few speakers, doesn't it?
Right, it does. And we're very excited this year to announce that we've instigated mobile bidding.
Yes.
So last year we were paper pushers, but we've gone very green technology this year through the help of our amazing partner at Katie Sky Group. They have just been tremendous to help us push the Gala over the top. So if you go onto our website and you buy the ticket, you will get an email with how to link to our mobile bidding process.
Perfect.
And you can have access to all of the live auction items, all of what we're calling the big board items, which are live-esque, but they won't actually be live. Yeah. All the silent auction items, and you can start bidding today. And it's all paperless. And the other wonderful thing is that the bidding will go on all evening until I believe around 8:30. So you can be sitting at the gala table, which, by the way, Kerby, I want you to know that we would love to have any man or woman come. We have a lot of wonderful forward men who support us that we are appreciative. So there is room for everyone at the table. So
when you mentioned something that I thought I would mention, and that is that even though I'm not a professional woman, I've been on your mailing list for many years and enjoy reading those and benefit from it as well. So men and women, certainly the case. But let's just for a moment, since we've been talking about this mentoring program, explain what it would take, because there maybe are some people listening right now that say, I have always wanted someone to give me some guidance, some direction. I've been looking for a mentor, and I would love to sign up. Or maybe you know someone that you know would like to do that, and you can pass this information on. What does that take to actually begin to sign up? I know we missed one deadline, but there's going to be future opportunities to do that, right?
Right. Yes, sir. Great question. Yeah, it's all on our webpage at forwardwomen.org. So if you are interested in the mentor program, you would be eligible for the next upcoming
Yes.
season. I believe that is in May 3rd, I think, is when we start registration. So
Right.
it's all on the website. You can go there. You can register there. There's information where if you have questions, you can contact any one of us for questions that might lead you to make that great decision for your future.
And again, there are all sorts of other resources. If you click down, you will see, for example, that there are all sorts of different books and things of that nature. We've mentioned a few times. Let's mention it again because there may still be some people that have never seen the book Work, Love, Pray by Diane Pattison. You have a study guide that goes with that. Then there were the Be Refreshed devotionals. Then you have all sorts of other resources that are there, Working Women of the Bible Study Guide, and on and on and on. So what I want to encourage people to do is don't just go to the website forwardwomen.org and sign up to the Gala, which is really a very good thing. Begin to navigate around there. There's just a lot of resources that are available to our listeners. And I think, again, the first step is to sign up for your newsletter, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, again, I know this was your kind of maiden voyage here, but Pam, it's just been great to have you on radio for the very first time. And, of course, I remember the first time I interviewed Diane, and certainly have appreciated the work that she does. I appreciate the work that all of you are doing, and I wish you the very best at this gala on Saturday. So thank you for coming in studio today.
Thank you, Kerby.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, as you heard me mention just a few minutes ago, we are going to, in the next hour, kind of keep a theme running. Wasn't necessarily intended, but Jon Gordon's going to be with us. We're going to talk about the power of a positive team. And it is interesting because some of the research that even I've done over the years has found, as we've talked about marriages, and he mentions one of the works that came out just a couple of years ago, pointing out that a marriage works when you have 5 positive comments for every 1 negative one. You can see some of the same kinds of things that he's going to be talking about in terms of developing a team. He's got some great stories about teams. Some of those are athletic teams. Some of those are business teams. And if you think about it, your church and your small group, your Sunday school class, it's a team. Guess what? Your family's kind of a team as well. So whether you are heading up a team of marketers or whether you're a coach for a team or whether you're just saying, no, I'm really not on a team. Yes, you are. You're going to benefit, I think, from this conversation we'll have next hour. Then the third hour, we'll get back into the news. Oh, yes, we have had some testimony here before Congress by Michael Cohen. We, of course, had a opportunity to try to bring about some kind of peace from North Korea. So we'll talk about that. And, of course, we had the oral arguments yesterday before the Supreme Court on the Cross case. Those are just a few of many things we'll be talking about in that third hour. But let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
The leader looked around the table, motioning to the older men. He said, "You're here to remind us how faithful God has been in the past. Now, you middle-aged guys, you keep us focused on what God is doing right now. Make sure we don't stop. And you younger guys, keep us looking forward. Imagine what God wants us to be doing in the years to come." There's a lot of wisdom there. We have to be thankful for the past, focused on the present, and mindful to plan for a great future. Many listeners have made bold moves to partner with Point of View Radio and accomplish great things for more than 45 years. But as we look around, we do see many positive things, and I think we can all admit there's a lot more to be done. It's time to think about your next bold move, what you can do to invest for our nation's future. Be thinking about that. If you have an answer now, don't wait. Make your next bold move now. Give online at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. It's our future. The time is now. Pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. We're going to spend some time in this first hour here talking about the power of a positive team, but then we'll come back into some of the issues in the news next hour. Of course, we had the oral arguments yesterday before the Supreme Court on the Cross case out of Maryland. Now, Kelly Shackelford, who was in the courtroom, will be with us tomorrow on our Friday weekend edition, so we'll talk about that. Of course, Michael Cohen giving some testimony before Congress, and we'll get into that issue. I want to cover also some other very important votes taking place in Congress right now, and maybe we'll even look back over what happened or did not happen in Hanoi as it relates to North Korea. So there'll be a lot to talk about in the next hour, but I thought for just a few minutes it would be really good this hour to focus on this idea of a powerful team, and one that's a positive team. Now, you might say, well, I'm not on an athletic team. I'm not a coach. First of all, I suspect a good number of you have either been on an athletic team or coaching one right now. Some of you might say, well, yeah, but I'm not in business either. We don't have a marketing team, and that may or may not be true, but I suspect quite a few of you have also been in situations where you benefit from that. But if you think about it, even if in your own church, that's a team. Your Sunday school class, that's a team. Think about your family. That's a team as well. And so these principles, I think, apply whether or not you're running a Fortune 500 company and business, or whether you're running a sports team, or whether you're simply at church or in a family. I think you're going to benefit tremendously from the work that we've all benefited from over the years by Jon Gordon. You may be familiar with him because many of his best-selling books have really been put to the test in these Fortune 500 companies. And if you are familiar with him, perhaps you've seen his book, The Energy Bus, The Carpenter, Training Camp, You Win in the Locker Room First, or these, The Power of Positive Leadership, and the one we'll be talking about today, The Power of a Positive Team. He's a graduate of Cornell University and also has a master's degree from Emory University and joins us now by phone. So, Jon Gordon, it is a delight to have you on the program today.
It's great to be with you.
You know, the warm-up act for you was briefly in the first hour, we had Susan Packard, who is one of the co-founders of HDTV, and she's got a new book out called Fully Human. So we talked about some things related to positive ideas. But one of the ones that I thought was so striking is on this program before, we've worked about with some of the material that John Gottman and others have put together, which they've even found in marriages that are more likely to succeed are ones where the couple experiences at least 5 positive interactions to 1 negative interaction. And it seems to me that if it's important to be positive in a marriage, certainly important to be positive in a team. True?
Yes, and we know the ratio with teams is actually 3 positive to 1 negative. So for teams 3 to 1 or greater, and you will have a high-performing team. But we don't want the ratio to get to 13 to 1. If you have a 13 to 1 ratio, what happens is the team actually falls apart because no one's dealing with the real issues. No one's talking about the challenges that exist. It's Pollyanna positive. It's not real positive. But I would venture to say we don't need to add more negativity to our team interactions. I would think that we need to add more positivity to our team interactions and also our marriages as well.
Well, and again, sometimes people listen to the program because this next hour, you know what we're going to be talking about, all the negative things here, and they say, how can you be positive? Well, there are other things that you need to do, but we live in a world which is full of negativity anyway, so I don't think we have to worry about people getting too many compliments, too much encouragement, probably just the opposite. But nevertheless, that's the case. And what you talk about is let's take the second chapter, because I think that's one to really focus some time and attention on, that positive teams really create positive cultures. So it sort of starts with the leader, starts from the top. But I'd be also willing to say that sometimes even if you don't have a boss that's very positive, you can change the culture right where you are, can't you?
You can. Even if you influence one person, you are a leader. So you are contagious. And every day you're bringing your positive energy or your negative energy to your team. So you are contributing to the culture. You are building the culture by what you think, by what you do, and by what you say. So you can elevate it by what you think, you can improve it by what you say, and you can make it great by what you do. So it's really key for everybody in the team to know that they create the culture of it. It's not just the leader, it's everyone. So you have to own it and say, what kind of team do I want? What kind of culture do I want to create? Don't wait for someone else to do it. You start contributing to it today.
Well, and again, one of the points you make in there is culture is dynamic, not static. In other words, just because that's the way the culture in whatever it is, the church, I was just at a deacon meeting last night. They were talking about, let's be encouraging rather than discouraging. And
Right.
you really talk about this idea of vitamin C or being contagious. Positivity and positive ideas really can be contagious, can't they?
Oh, they can. And it's funny you mentioned the church. I had a church implement the no complaining rule with their congregation, with their leadership. It transformed the church because instead of focusing on complaints, they had everyone bring solutions. So you were allowed to complain, but you had to come with a solution to your complaint. And that transformed the organization. So, yes, you are contagious with your ideas, with your energy, and also with complaints or solutions.
Let's, if we can, use one example from athletics, and we'll get on to some others, but this one just jumped out at me because I love tennis, and I grew up in California, but I also lived in Virginia, so I could relate to the fact that University of Southern California, by the fact Penna Dexter is a graduate, she'll be on the round table tomorrow, and then, of course, you have the University of Virginia, but you talk about the tennis team, University of Virginia was always kind of falling short. Well, then the tennis coach decided to bring about some changes, and they won 4 out of the next 5 national championships. What changed?
Brian Boland said that he changed. He said for years he was all about winning. He didn't say it, but his team knew it. So it was all about winning and succeeding. And finally he had enough. He said, I have to change. I have to become a leader that focuses on the culture, the process, my team, develop them as leaders, and that's what he did. He set out to build a culture and build a real team. Next thing you know, they win 4 out of the next 5 championships. Well, we know Peter Smith at USC, he had won a number of championships, and what he did was he had Stevie Johnson. Stevie Johnson was an incredible leader who was committed, and it's really cool, as I talk about in the book, how USC won a championship, then UVA won the next 3 or 4 out of that. After that, you can go back and forth, and in talking to the coaches, I can see what happened and how these teams won, and it had to do with the culture, the leadership, and the commitment. And one thing that Brian Boland did was a constant team-building process throughout the season. It wasn't just in the beginning of the year. He was building his team throughout the year, and that really developed a strong team. So by the time they made it to the NCAA tournament, they were ready to go because they were a strong team and they were playing for each other instead of fighting against each other.
It's just really well said. Let's take a break. When we come back, I want to continue our conversation. We're privileged to have with us Jon Gordon. The book is entitled The Power of a Positive Team. It's just one of a series of books I would recommend. This one has 9 chapters. We've talked a little bit about positive teams create positive cultures. We'll come back and talk about how positive teams work together towards a shared vision. We sort of already illustrated that, but we'll get into it in more detail. How they work together for optimism, positivity, belief, how you can transform and remove negativity, how you communicate and connect, how you can commit and care, how you can strive to be better and eventually work together. It is just a fascinating book, and whatever team you're on, you're probably on multiple teams if you start thinking about it, you'll benefit from some of the things we're going to be talking about, and we'll continue that conversation right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Alex Berenson is a journalist who tended to be a libertarian when it came to drugs, but a conversation with his wife changed his perspective. She worked as a senior psychiatrist at the institution housing people diagnosed with psychotic disorders, like schizophrenia. She mentioned in passing that, of course, a patient had been smoking pot all his life. He asked why she said, of course, only to find out that all of them smoke marijuana and that he should check it out. He did. The medical literature is replete with links between marijuana, mental illness, and even violence. But you would never have heard that. Berenson says he has never seen a story where the gap between insider and outsider knowledge was so great or the stakes so high. At a time when most states are legalizing marijuana use, medical professionals are finding greater dangers with increased marijuana use. In his article and radio interview, he cited medical literature that challenges many of the myths perpetuated by advocates of medical marijuana and marijuana legalization. We're told that marijuana has many different medical uses. Actually, it's been shown to work in just a few narrow conditions. And we're also told that it's very effective for pain relief, yet it does not seem to be the case. As I've mentioned in previous commentaries, the National Academy of Medicine found that cannabis use is likely to increase the risk of developing schizophrenia and other psychoses. The higher the use, the greater the risk. Berenson then explains how this can lead to more violence. Most schizophrenics are not violent, but the latest medical literature has found that 1% of them are more violent. These are the scientific facts that deserve our attention, especially as other states consider drug legalization. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From roadside attractions, Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question. Run the Race, rated PG, now playing.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, continue our conversation with Jon Gordon today. One of the other ideas that you already alluded to is found in Chapter 3, and that is positive teams work together for a shared vision with a greater purpose. One of the things that is difficult in this sort of North American culture that we find ourselves in, Jon, is that everybody's kind of an individualist. Everyone sort of does their own thing. But if you're going to have a successful team, you need to cast a vision, and then you need to get individuals who are part of the team to buy into that vision. So talk about that for a minute, if you might.
Yeah, we're better together, and then together we accomplish amazing things. So no one creates success alone. We all need a team to be successful. So as a team, it's important to come together and say, okay, what is our vision? Where are we going? What are we working towards? And what is our purpose? Why are we working there? I love talking to Kerry Walsh-Jennings and Misty May, the greatest beach volleyball team of all time. And they said they wanted to be great together. It wasn't just about being an individual. It was about coming together to be great together and to be a great team. And you don't allow egos to get in the way when you want to do something and become something together. So I think you're right. I think there's a lot of individual focus today, but the truth is we are better together, and when we have a team that's working towards something together, people need to understand that they get better actually when they're working as part of a team. Would Tom Brady be Tom Brady without Bill Belichick? would Bill Belichick be Bill Belichick without Tom Brady? No, they're the greatest of all time because they had each other.
One of the things you talk about in that chapter is this idea of vision plus mission. Sometimes when we talk about casting a vision, that is good, but the mission statement and the vision statement really are two sides of a different coin. Both of them are important, aren't they?
They are. Vision is where we're going, and the mission is why we're going there. Some people create separate statements. I actually like to combine the two together into one statement. Like, my mission is and my vision is to encourage and inspire as many people as possible, one person at a time, to create a more positive world. So you're bringing the two together.
And so, again, that's just one of those comments about trying to maybe think through how to expose people to that and how to really begin to make your vision and purpose come alive. Do you have some examples of that? Because in your book, you talk a little bit about a leadership team in one particular place where I know we broadcast in South Carolina, in which you're really trying to have them kind of get a vision, even in this particular health clinic, about trying to begin to take the ideas on paper and really, in a sense, give shoe leather to them.
Right. Well, like Palmetto Health Systems in South Carolina, when I was speaking to the company, I actually interviewed people before I spoke, many of the leaders in the company, and also people in different positions at all levels. And it was really great because everyone could articulate what the vision was and what the mission was and why the hospital existed, but even more importantly, how they could contribute to the vision and what their personal mission was to contribute to it. So they really had a sense of engagement and ownership every day they showed up. Talking about South Carolina, also worked with Clemson football for the past 7 years. And you want to talk about a coach that had a vision,
Dabo
that
Swinney.
was on a mission?
Yeah, go for it.
You know it. Dabo Swinney. Everyone loves Dabo now. And if you don't love Dabo, then you really don't know him, because if you met him, you'd love him. One of the best leaders I've ever been around in corporate America in sports. He's incredible. And he inspires his team with vision. He had a vision when he took over the program, and that vision was to become a program where everyone else wanted to be like them. It was going to be academically and athletically powerful and dominant. It wasn't just about being a great team. It was going to be about a team that was filled with character, that was all about excellence on and off the field. And only Clemson and Stanford actually had the highest ratings of combining the two. If you think about Clemson football, that's pretty amazing that was his vision and mission. And now as a coaching staff, their mission is to win the hearts and the minds of their players, to serve their hearts, to serve their talents, and to bring a greater love to their players. And he was motivated by Galatians 6:9, let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. And that ignited them towards their vision and mission.
Again, one of the stories you have in there, I don't want to take all of them because I want people to go and get a copy of the book and read it, but you said that when he came to the first meeting with the team, he had two signs. One is I can't, with the T crossed out, and the other sign, believe, because he knew there wasn't a lot of belief either inside or outside the program. So those signs and those kinds of reminders are key as well. And I know, John, that sometimes we suggest that people put something on an index card and put it on the refrigerator, put it on their screensaver. There is the need, given the fact that there is so much negativity in our world, to remind us to be positive, because the natural, almost default setting isn't towards optimism or positivity or belief. It's towards just the opposite of those, isn't it?
It is. It's a battle every day between the negative and the positive. And we are bombarded by negative messages. And when clutter sets in, we forget our why. We lose our way. And so we do need reminders to remind us of our mission, to remind us of our purpose, to remind us of what matters most. And often we get discouraged individually and collectively. We don't give up because it's hard. We give up because we get discouraged. So if we could stay encouraged and remind ourselves of things to help encourage us and to stay positive on this journey, not Pollyanna positive, but where we really stay positive through adversity and challenges to create a better world, to build the future, we will overcome. We will succeed. And that's what Dabo did. I mean, he inspired his team with belief, and I see leaders all the time. And sometimes we just need a reminder to believe. I spoke to the Miami Heat just 2 days ago after their loss to the Suns. And the message was believe. Let's maintain faith as we move forward, because what we believe, what we think about the future will determine the future we create. You just lost a rough game. You've lost 9 out of the last 11. But you know what? We got 24 games left. Let's create a brighter and better future together. Then you see Dwayne Wade hit that miracle shot last night. It was so cool to see.
There you go. Just before we take a break, one more I want to pick out of that chapter, the replace have to with get to. It is interesting because even in a deacons meeting the other day, we're talking about we're going to be negative. We're not going to feed the negative. We're going to positive. We're going to all that. But the other one was one of the individuals stand up and say, when we have to go to other situations, hospital visitation, we have to go to a meeting that's 24 miles away from where we normally meet. He says, I don't want to hear anybody saying, I can't believe we have to drive that, because, again, it's not that we have to do this. We get to do that. And if you change that, it's almost like flipping a switch and saying, okay, I could get negative about this opportunity. I could get negative about this obligation or this commitment, but instead say, I get to do that. It is one of the ways to begin to feed that positive idea, isn't it?
Totally. We change have to get to. We change a complaining voice to an appreciative heart. And I'm convinced that abundance flows into our life when gratitude flows out of our heart. So it's not about what we have to do. You get to live this life. You get to make a difference. You get to drive a car 20 minutes, 30 minutes, while so many can't even drive. My mom passed away at 59 12 years ago. She doesn't get to do anything anymore, but I do. So life is a gift, not an obligation.
Well, very good. Let's take a break. I want to continue our conversation with Jon Gordon. And again, we have some information about him and the book. I would imagine almost all of you could find it in your local bookstore. It's been out for quite some time, but we also have, of course, JonGordon.com, so you can get the book there if you'd like, or all sorts of other books that I would certainly recommend. Some that come to mind are The Energy Bus, The Carpenter Training Camp, or the other one that's sort of a great companion to this, which is The Power of Positive Leadership. So you might want to get both. This is The Power of Positive Team, but we're talking about The Power of Positive Leadership, and we have a link to his website there. And you've heard the story before of which dog or which wolf you're going to feed. Of course, you perhaps are familiar with the book Positive Dog. It has Matt and Bubba, and Matt is the one that calls everyone Mutt, and Bubba is the positive dog. But whether you talk about dogs or which wolf you're going to feed or which human, it's kind of the battle between positive versus negative, and it's a battle that we face every single day. If we're going to be positive, certainly those of us that are in church leadership need to set that tone from the top, which is why I would certainly recommend the book, The Power of Positive Leadership. But also all of us as members of the body of Christ, as individuals who find ourselves in teams at work, teams sometimes athletically, and of course, as I've said before, your family's a team there as well. Recognize that you are always part of different teams, and so those are some resources that are available. We come back, we'll talk a little bit about some of the others. There's a positiveuniversity.com, there's websites, there are all sorts of other resources that I think you'll want to know about. And as we go to a break, that would be a good time to go to that website that we have provided for you to really begin to think about how to be a more positive person. Just go to JonGordon.com, and we have information there about that, his book. You can sign up for his email tips and much more. And we'll continue our conversation with him right after these important messages.
Question: do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about MediShare.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With MediShare, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with MediShare. And they actually like MediShare more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of MediShare.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less, and they like it more. No wonder MediShare is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, Jon Gordon with us as we talk about his newest book, The Power of a Positive Team. But if you'd like to know about some of his other books or some of the other resources, let me, for just a minute, Jon, have you talk about what's on your website, because you have a number of tools. If people would like to have you come and speak or do consulting with you or training or even get some of your books, they can find all of that at the website, jongordon.com. But talk about some of the resources you have made available for some of our listeners.
Sure. Well, we have a ton of action plans that allow people to take the ideas from the books and put them into action. We actually have a free 7-step plan that anybody could download and use, and it's a 7-step plan to start boosting your positivity immediately. We do a weekly newsletter every week where I write and add a lot of value and share that value to people. It could be on how to be your best individually, also how to build a great team. So a lot of the stuff in my books, I'll do excerpts and share those in the newsletters. And over the years, many newsletters have made its way into books.
That's right.
So I'm always sharing a lot of content and value that way. And then we just have just a ton of free resources on there for people. And we also have Positive University, which is a free podcast where every week I interview a new guest and we talk about how to overcome challenges, how to build your business or how to build your life, and how to make a greater impact.
And again, that's kind of a who's who. Some of the individuals we've interviewed on this radio program are individuals that you have interviewed over the years. And again, it's 100% free, and you have access at Positive U for some of the videos and podcasts and other resources. It's available on your website. It's also in the back of your book as well. So if people want to know a little bit more, that's how they can find out. But let's keep the train moving down the road. Another particular chapter I found very helpful: Positive Teams Transform and Remove Negativity. Up until now, we've really been kind of talking about, the whole idea of being positive. But you start out with a story about Jack Del Rio, who we knew, those of us in the Dallas area, from the Dallas Cowboys, of course, became the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. But it does seem to me, and of course you talk about that in your book, The Energy Bus, just the need to, first of all, not only promote positivity, but talk about for just a minute how to remove negativity.
Right. One of the biggest mistakes we make as leaders in teams is we do not address the negativity that exists on our teams. So you have to address it. You have to confront it. The goal is to transform it, make the negative and turn it into positive. Or if that doesn't work, you do have to remove it. And so I love giving people a guideline because it's not Pollyanna positive, as we talked about. We have to really deal with the negative issues because it will sabotage your team. So as a team, you come together, you talk about this at the cultural level. It's not okay to be moody. It's not okay to be a complainer. It's not okay to sabotage the team. It's all about building a great team, contributing to a great team. It also means we have to have the difficult conversations, right? It's not about, just because you're saying something negative and trying to make the team better, that you're an energy vampire, or just because you're having a bad day, you're an energy vampire. It just means that you're adding and contributing more positive than you are than the negative. And you want to make sure, too, that you're not someone who is negatively contagious and draining the team. So I really like to help leaders address negativity and help them create a positive environment where people could do their best work. So you feed the positive, weed the negative, and then you create an environment where everyone could do their best work. That's your job as a leader, to remove the obstacles so everyone could do a great job.
You know, again, one of the things I liked is you talked about weed and feed, and anybody right about now starting to think about, I want to make my garden look good. I want my lawn to look good. And so some of us that are kind of amateur gardeners, we do the weed and feed. In other words, we sometimes try to pull up some of the weeds, but we also spread some things to kill off the weeds. But at the same time, we also want to feed the grass. And so if you see that in an agricultural sense, of course, you use that also in the sense with Michael Phelps as one of your illustrations. It's not an either or, it's a both and. And so sometimes we can be so focused on the positive that somebody's really giving you an honest critique of something that is really needing attention. That's not, like you said, an energy vampire. That's part of the weeding part. But again, if they have a complaint, give me a solution for that. And so that's the weed and feed. I thought that was just a great little insight that I'm going to use, if nothing else, because most people at one time or another have recognized the importance of weeding and feeding their lawn, and they recognize it's a both and, not an either or. So I appreciate that in the book as well.
Yeah, I remember I had a gardener come out to my house, and he talked about how he didn't use any chemicals. I said, how do you do that? He said, well, I created an environment where the grass can grow really well and then spread. And then it spreads so much that it just crowds out the weeds, and the weeds have nowhere to grow. And I realized that our job is to create a culture that is so strong and positive that the negativity has nowhere to breed and grow. And that person who just wants to sabotage a team will get off the bus themselves. They'll leave. They'll get out of the garden because they no longer want to be a part of that because the positivity is spreading too much. And I have countless examples of organizations we've worked with, Fortune 500 companies, school districts, sports teams, where they apply these principles. They weed the negative, feed the positive. The negativity leaves or gets off the bus or changes and transforms, and we wind up having amazing success as a result of that. One person can't make a team, but one person could break a team.
Yes.
We have to make sure we don't allow that one person or those few people on the team to sabotage it.
How many times we've seen great teams ruined because of one prima donna? And again, that's just another great illustration of that. Let's, if we can, talk about some aspects of team building, and part of that is the learning to communicate and connect. Communication is key. If you keep it all in and you don't cast the vision, we certainly understand the need for that. But you go into a little more detail in terms of how to communicate and how to really build a positive team through your communication and connection. Explain, if you might.
Well, where there's avoiding communication, negativity will fill it. So just talking about negativity, we have to make sure we're filling the void with positive communication so negativity can't breed and grow. So communication builds trust. Trust generates commitment. Commitment fosters teamwork, and teamwork delivers results. Most teams break down because of poor communication. So we have to make sure we're really focused on communication as a leader and also as a team. Ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do we communicate as a team? As a leader, ask your team, how well do I communicate with you? And then ask a follow-up question, what would make it a 10? You're going to get all this great feedback on how you can make it a 10 and how you can be better. The number is not as important, like whether you're a 6 or a 7 or an 8, that's all subjective. But what you could do to make it a 10 is where you find the gold and the gems to be a better leader and to communicate better.
And again, part of that is to ask it at every level. Some people might say, how do you think I'm communicating? And that's one test. But how about one-to-one communication? How much do all of us have the ability to communicate that vision? So it's a multifolded strategy, like you said. And number two, the real goal, the real value is not how I can move it from a 5 to a 6 or a 7, but really how I could move it from a 6 or a 7 to a 10. And those are going to be some really important aspects of that as well. Since we're still spending some time talking about the C's, how about let's add a few more? Commit and care. Talk about communication. We talk about connection. But what about this idea of commit and care? How does that fit into this whole scheme?
Well, I first want to mention you first have to connect in order to commit, because a connected team is what builds a committed team. You will never have commitment without connection. So you communicate to connect. It's not just about communicating at the surface level. We're communicating to develop a stronger connection, a bond of trust, where we are fighting together and for each other instead of against each other. So we have this strong bond together, and then as a result of that, we now want to commit. And through our commitment to each other, we are serving and sacrificing for each other. I asked a principal. I asked a business leader. I asked a coach, when did you become a strong team? They all said when we served each other instead of ourselves. So when you serve we, not me, and you focus on we and not me, and you make we the priority, you make the team the priority, you're now committed to something greater, and you're committing to others. And that's when you really build a strong team, when everyone's committed. Now, people often say, well, so-and-so is not committed, and Jane's not committed, Jack's not committed. Well, why should I commit? I always tell people, you commit because it's the right thing to do. You be the committed one. If you are committed, I guarantee you will get commitment back. You lead. You go first, and as you commit to others, you will get commitment back. My marriage changed when I made this my motto. The more I love my wife, the more I love my life. It wasn't about what she did. It wasn't about happy wife, happy life. It was about me just loving her and knowing I'm going to do everything I can to commit to her. And as a result of that, I'm going to feel good about who I am, the husband I am, and the leader I am. Well, it's been amazing. The more I've done that, the more I've gotten commitment back, and our marriage is better than ever. So you commit, you lead the way, and that means you show you care. So going to care, our fourth C, it's all about caring more. I think we all care. Well, actually, we don't all care. I think some people don't care. But the key to being a great leader and a great team is to care. You care about your effort, your performance, and each other.
Well, we'll take a break, and Jon Gordon with us. We'll talk a little bit more about some other things positive teams do right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Riley Bembry returned from World War I, a changed man. Upon his return, this former Army medic settled in Los Angeles and became a butcher. But the city could not contain him, and he headed into the Mojave Desert and became a prospector. By the time the Great Depression gripped the nation, other veterans of the Great War had found their way to Bembry's cabin, each seeking to escape the emotional and physical scars left from the war. Together in 1934, they erected a simple 7-foot monument atop a rocky outcropping not far from Bembry's cabin, but miles and miles from anything else. They chose a common symbol to honor war dead, a white cross, and dedicated it to honor the dead of all wars. When Bembry died in 1984, Henry Sandoz, Bembry's close friend, began to care for the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial Cross. In 2001, someone sued. A judge would eventually order the memorial hidden from view, literally covered with a padlocked bag, while the case was decided. First Liberty had the privilege of working with Henry Sandoz, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and others to defend that memorial. Before he was senator, Ted Cruz volunteered his time as lead counsel on the case. Because of Henry Sandoz, Ted Cruz, Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and First Liberty, that memorial still stands today just where Bembry placed it in honor of the dead of all wars. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again just for a few more minutes with Jon Gordon. Again, we appreciate him giving us some time today to talk about his new book, The Power of a Positive Team. And Jon, I thought we'd focus on the last two chapters. One of those is the idea of positive teams are always striving to get better. One of the things you mention, I think I've mentioned this before, I think I even did a commentary on it a number of years ago, is what's called the 1% rule, because I've heard stories about this. Matter of fact, the story I think I used has to do with cycling. You have some other examples, lacrosse and a number of others. But again, it's the idea that if I could just try to improve one thing, 1% more time, energy, effort, focus, whatever than I did yesterday, if those become cumulative, that is a very helpful way to begin to think about how to actually improve the circumstances that many of our listeners find themselves in right now.
Very much so. We can't quantify 1%, but we can all give a little bit more. We can all show up and strive for excellence every day. Instead of being just a carpenter, we can see our work as being a craftsman or a craftswoman, where we're focused on excellence. We put a little more care into what we're building, and we're always striving to get better. We're looking for that little edge. So, I tell teams all the time, like especially sports teams, hey, can you give 1% more today than you gave yesterday? Can you give 1% more tomorrow than today? And they all say yes. They all know they can actually give a little bit more. We all have that reserve. I don't know why that is, but we all know we can. And then when you ask why we're not, why are we not working as hard? Why are we not doing as much as we can? The real key is because you have to care more. And if you care more, you will do more, give more, and ultimately become more. So it's that caring that drives the excellence. Also, purpose drives the excellence. But yes, 1% rule is a really great, tangible way for a team to ask themselves every day, are we pushing ourselves? Are we striving to get better every day?
One of the other aspects of that, of course, you talk about the SEAL team, but I've heard various SEALs say that even when you think you're at your limit, running is probably a good example, jogging or weightlifting, whatever it might be. Sometimes their conclusion is that you have as much as 40%, even 60% more. So even when we think we're at the red line and we're at our limits, there's still much more we could do. And sometimes it takes just a little bit of focus, a little bit of planning, a little bit of pushing ourselves beyond the comfort zone to discover a new person inside of you, don't we?
Yes, you have to be uncomfortable in order to grow, in order to get better. And a lot of times we want to stay in our comfort zone. I wrote a book called Training Camp, What the Best Do Better Than Everyone Else. And the best allow themselves to be uncomfortable so growth can happen.
Just before we let you go, let's talk about that last chapter, We Are Better Together. I had an individual many years ago, before a lot of people were writing some of these books, just simply said, everything I did of success and significance happened as part of a team. And I've always remembered that from decades ago because it is so counterintuitive to sort of this American Yankee Doodle, I can do it, can-do spirit, individualism, I'm the Lone Ranger. Even the Lone Ranger had Tonto. I mean, there's just a sense in which we so have bought into this idea that what can you do, instead of asking the question, what can we do? And so one of the things you really end with is this idea that we really are better with a team.
I love that you just said that, like, what can we do, not what can you do? Right. We say self-made man, right? How often do we say that? Well, I don't think anyone is ever self-made. I know I look around. My mom and dad had a big impact on me. Their love made all the difference. I would not be who I am today if it wasn't for my wife. When I was miserable and negative and unhappy, and she wouldn't let me stay in that. She threatened me and challenged me. She said, if you don't change, we're over. So you better change. And I agreed to change. And that began my journey of becoming a more positive person. And her support, love, and encouragement throughout the years really helped me become who I am today. So we are better together. We all need a team to be successful. And then when we come together as a team, we're able to make a greater impact and leave a greater legacy. I believe that teams are, they're not here by accident. They're here to do something great together. They're here to accomplish something amazing together. Don't just go through the motions. Decide as a team, what is it we want to build? What do we want to transform? What do we want to create that will make the world a better place? I mean, I think about the cars that are being developed, the new technologies, all of the new, health cures that are going to be coming our way. We are at the forefront, I believe, of incredible positive change for our future. I do believe the best is yet to come, but I know that we need a team to create the best.
One of the things I love in the back of your book is you have 11 thoughts about teamwork. And of course, one of those is we is greater than me. You have a whole series of references. But just real quickly before I let you go, let's talk about some of the other things that are available, because I mentioned, of course, JonGordon.com, but we can also send them to powerofapositiveteam.com. There are keynote presentations. There's an action plan. There's a video program. There's off-site team building, as well as there's all sorts of other resources. And again, we just mentioned a few minutes ago the positiveuniversity.com. So talk about the various websites that would be available to our listeners who want to follow up on what they've heard today.
Sure, Power of a Positive Team. And there we now have a consulting program I'm very excited about. And as part of this consulting program, one of our consultants will work with your team, and we fit all sorts of budgets, and we will work with your team to become a stronger team. It's our goal to really help teams become stronger. So you do an assessment, we have the action plan, but a live consultant that works with you for a full day, works with you and your team for a full day, will help you become stronger together. We'll take you through the principles and the framework and the process that I've used with the greatest teams on the planet, and we'll take you through that process to help you become a stronger team. So I'm really excited about that. Also, the video program coming out, if you don't want to bring someone to your organization, I walk you through the principles and the steps as a team. So you'll watch this video together. You'll all have a workbook, and you can take this plan and apply it yourselves of this video program I just created. And the audiobook is coming out, so I'm really excited about that. So the audiobook is coming out real soon. If you haven't read it, you'd rather listen to it on your way to work or school, you can now listen to it via the audiobook.
Well, Jon, I appreciate you giving us some time today here on Point of View. Thank you for writing so many books, helping us understand how to build a positive leadership, how to build a positive team, and appreciate you being on Point of View with us.
I was honored to be with you. Thank you so much.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into some of those issues that are in the news, and maybe that's why we needed a dose of positivity, because we'll talk about Michael Cohen, 4 big allegations that he made yesterday, and this comes from our friend David French, who's, of course, not exactly a fan of Donald Trump. He almost ran against Donald Trump in the general election, but I think he did a pretty good job of summarizing some of that. Yesterday were the oral arguments before the Supreme Court. Does that mean that this particular memorial cross from World War I will stand in Bladensburg, Maryland, or will it be bulldozed down? And more importantly, I think we can hope that the cross will remain. What about this so-called lemon test that has been used to confuse just about everybody about what is or is not constitutional? Then, of course, I want to talk a little bit about a piece that I've posted about the filibuster. There are some now that are saying maybe we won't have a filibuster anymore in the United States Senate, and what could that mean, especially if Democrats take control not only of the House and the Senate, but the presidency in 2 years, what that could mean for American politics. The House passed a very significant gun control piece of legislation for background checks, so we'll talk about that. And if anybody's interested, we'll look at what didn't happen in Hanoi on the negotiations between the president and the leader of North Korea. And so we have a lot to cover, and we will do our best. But as we go along, we also would welcome your phone calls. Perhaps you have some comments about some of those issues in the news. Don't forget, if we don't get to all of it in the next hour, we have our Friday weekend edition. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford will be with us tomorrow. But let's take a break and get back into the news right after this.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called Medi-Share, and Medi-Share is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. And get this, over the years, Medi-Share members have shared more than $2 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with Medi-Share. The typical savings for a family is around $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join Medi-Share anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
This hour, I want to spend some time looking at some of the issues in the news and trying to make some sense out of all of it. And I want to give at least a segment to Michael Cohen, who testified yesterday before Congress. Now, he's been testifying the last couple of days, but this is the only time we've had a chance to hear what he said, because the other times in which he has given testimony has been behind closed doors. Is it worth mentioning a disclaimer? I think so, probably, when you have an individual who has been already convicted, not just accused, but convicted of lying to Congress, who's then brought back to speak to Congress. You've got to at least take a lot of this with a grain of salt. That's the illustration that David French uses. I'd say maybe even a barrel of salt. I'm not used to being around people who lie continuously and then trying to sort out what they said is true or not true. But I think it's worth at least a little bit of time before we move on to some other issues that are probably more important. I mean, even yesterday when Nick Pitts and I were talking about this, we said, what's the significance? Well, it's significant if indeed you are invested in the belief that the president has colluded with the Russians, or that he has lied or implied that people are to lie. Suborning perjury and things like that are certainly serious crimes of anyone, including the chief executive officer of the United States of America. Got it. But at the same time, will it affect you and your family? Well, probably not. But it's worth some time and attention before we move on to some things that I think will affect your family. And so I think the piece that I would point you to is one that we've just more recently added by David French. He's been on the program with us before. Nobody can accuse him of being a real fan of Donald Trump. After all, as I mentioned just last hour, he seriously thought about running against Donald Trump in the general election as an independent. But that being said, I've appreciated his perspective over the years, first as a Christian, as well as a lawyer, as well as somebody writing for National Review. He plays it pretty straight down the middle, and that's why I think it's so helpful. And so he talks about 4 big allegations. You can read all of this, which we've posted on the website, but I'm going to go through this a little quicker. First, that Michael Cohen testified that Roger Stone knew and told Donald Trump about the WikiLeaks document dump in advance of the Democratic Convention. Number 2, that Michael Cohen testified that he suspected Donald Trump knew in advance about Donald Trump Jr.'s infamous meeting with the Russian lawyer. 3, that Michael Cohen asserted that Trump directed Cohen to make porn star hush money payments and later reimbursed him while Trump was president. Number 4, Michael Cohen claimed that Donald Trump gave him implied directions to lie to Congress and that Trump's personal lawyer edited his false testimony. The first 2 are ones that is what sometimes people have called a little bit of a nothing burger, but let's go through those, because the first 2 certainly are examples of the first time you have somebody under oath alleging that in one way or another Donald Trump or Trump's campaign was involved in sort of these bumbling efforts with the Trump campaign to try to do some kind of communication with Russians or Russian agents or Russian assets. And so that is the case. And so the argument that is made by Michael Cohen is, quote, I'm now quoting him, In July 2016, days before the Democratic convention, I was in Trump's office when his secretary announced that Roger Stone was on the phone. Mr. Trump must put Mr. Stone on the speakerphone. Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Well, that's the allegation. Probably pretty true. Don't know that that does anything more other than suggest that he did know in advance about the WikiLeaks dump. But if indeed that's the way this played out, it illustrates that he wasn't involved in trying to obtain those WikiLeaks materials, or that he was behind the attempt to try to pull them. And so, again, it's interesting. It doesn't certainly rise to anything other than the kind of information that he would have as the president's lawyer, who was in the room at the time in which it was actually announced. The second claim is that Michael Cohen claimed that, at least concluded, that Donald Trump must have known in advance that when Donald Trump Jr. wanted to meet with the Russian lawyer at Trump Tower, this was because on every single example that he could come up with, he actually goes on to say that Donald Jr. would never set up any meeting of any significance alone, and certainly without checking with his father. Well, again, as I think David French does a good job of saying, this is testimony we should take with a grain of salt from anyone, let alone a known liar trying to rehabilitate his reputation in part by throwing out allegation after allegation against the president. There's nothing actually there. There is no specific connection. It's a supposition based upon speculation. It's not worthy of any additional thought, absent even a single piece of corroborating evidence. So those are the first two. Now, David French says the other two actually are more significant, although those aren't the ones most of the mainstream press have been talking about. And that is, first of all, the explosive charge, the third one, that Donald Trump personally directed a payment of hush money to porn stars during the campaign and personally wrote Cohen, that is Michael Cohen, a check reimbursing him for the expenses after becoming president. And so, again, the argument from Michael Cohen is that these hush money payments were made on Trump's orders, that the president that these were reimbursed while Trump was president by monthly amounts of $35,000 over a course of 12 months. And in order to provide any substantiating evidence, Michael Cohen brought a copy of one check for $35,000 that Trump signed from his personal bank account. So there's that one. And then finally, he says there's the deal with, as he says, Michael Cohen's claim about false testimony to Congress about Trump's continuing efforts to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. You might remember that BuzzFeed got themselves into all sorts of trouble when they claimed that indeed Donald Trump directed Cohen to lie to Congress about his negotiations. The special counsel, in a kind of an unprecedented move, you might remember we talked about this a few months ago, quickly contested the BuzzFeed account, and the whole story was relegated to fake news. We now see that what Michael Cohen said yesterday is that Trump really just sort of implied that he should lie. He made a point about the fact that Mr. Trump did not directly tell me to lie to Congress. Okay, well, then you sort of just figure out that that's what he wanted you to do. And then you have this other kind of interesting speculation about the fact that BuzzFeed says then the testimony about this suggests that it was changed by the president's lawyer, Jay Sekulow. This is where, again, David French, I think, adds some perspective. He says, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege here and state in all my years I've known Jay Sekulow, I've never, ever seen him ever come close to violating the canons of legal ethics, much less knowingly attempt to provide false testimony to Congress. So he concludes by saying if you're invested in the idea that Trump was a co-conspirator with Vladimir Putin, yesterday was really a disappointment. But if you believe that Trump is a man of exceedingly poor character, well, maybe you had a few opportunities to have that confirmed as well. Not a lot there, but that's the four allegations. You can read it in its entirety on our website. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Alex Berenson is a journalist who tended to be a libertarian when it came to drugs, but a conversation with his wife changed his perspective. She worked as a senior psychiatrist at the institution housing people diagnosed with psychotic disorders, like schizophrenia. She mentioned in passing that, of course, a patient had been smoking pot all his life. He asked why she said, of course, only to find out that all of them smoke marijuana and that he should check it out. He did. The medical literature is replete with links between marijuana, mental illness, and even violence. But you would never have heard that. Berenson says he has never seen a story where the gap between insider and outsider knowledge was so great or the stakes so high. At a time when most states are legalizing marijuana use, medical professionals are finding greater dangers with increased marijuana use. In his article and radio interview, he cited medical literature that challenges many of the myths perpetuated by advocates of medical marijuana and marijuana legalization. We're told that marijuana has many different medical uses. Actually, it's been shown to work in just a few narrow conditions. And we're also told that it's very effective for pain relief, yet it does not seem to be the case. As I've mentioned in previous commentaries, the National Academy of Medicine found that cannabis use is likely to increase the risk of developing schizophrenia and other psychoses. The higher the use, the greater the risk. Berenson then explains how this can lead to more violence. Most schizophrenics are not violent, but the latest medical literature has found that 1% of them are more violent. These are the scientific facts that deserve our attention, especially as other states consider drug legalization. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From roadside attractions, Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question. Run the Race, rated PG, now playing.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, let's talk about some of the things happening in front of the Supreme Court first and then in Congress. We're going to look at the Supreme Court oral arguments, but then when we come back from the break, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about a bill that already has passed the House of Representatives, oftentimes referred to as the Bipartisan Background Checks Act, and that has passed 240 to 190. And we'll get into what that might mean for the Second Amendment. But not only has that bill passed, but another bill put forward by Steve Scalise. He's a representative from Louisiana. You might remember that he sustained what were life-threatening injuries after being shot when he was at a baseball practice. They were doing a congressional baseball game. They were practicing for that, and an individual actually opened fire on them. And he has actually introduced... or actually, I guess, refers to a piece of legislation called H.R. 112, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, which would actually increase the amount of time that you could provide the FBI with background checks on gun buyers. So we'll get into some of these issues of background check. Also, one of the other articles we've posted here, if Democrats end the filibuster, it could break American politics. That sounds like a bit of hyperbole until you get into it. I still believe that the filibuster sometimes almost strikes me as unconstitutional, because what happens is, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, I'm going to try to play this down the line, it doesn't seem fair to me that if Democrats have a majority in the Senate, they should not be forced to always get a supermajority to pass legislation. That makes no sense. And so as a result, 41 individuals in the Senate can stop everything, which is why we've screeched to a halt. And right now, of course, you can see how, even fewer individuals sometimes can halt any kind of meaningful legislation in the Senate. Of course, they changed the filibuster, at least for some of these judicial nominees, which is why they're moving through a little faster. But we'll see how this gets played out in just a few minutes. But I thought before we spend our time talking about what's happening in the House with gun control, what might be happening in the Senate in the future with the filibuster, we would look at what happened yesterday before the Supreme Court. I was just informed that Kelly Shackelford, who I was hoping was going to be with us, will not. Maybe we can get him by phone, or we can talk to some other people next week. But this is in a very important case. If you've listened to Point of View for any length of time, you know why we think that it is. And that is, at its face, it's pretty simple. And that is, 93 years ago, you had some individuals who said, we're never going to be able to go over to Europe to visit the graves of our children, our sons, who were killed in World War I, what at that time was called the Great War. So they decided to put up a cross in Bladensburg. It's 40 feet high, to pay respect to the 49 men in Prince George's County in Maryland who died in the Great War, now which we call World War I. That was on private land at the time, but then as there was a need to expand the highway, they simply had the highway go around the median and allowed the memorial cross to remain. But that, of course, then put it on public land, and you immediately have then the American Humanist Association, in this case, or sometimes it's Americans United for Separation of Church and State, or Freedom from Religion Foundation, one of our buddies, will then say this is an unconstitutional establishment of the religion. The district court, when that was brought to them, said that did not violate the Constitution, but it went then to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which has now become about as liberal as the Ninth Circuit Court out in California, and it held that its inherent religious meaning would compel any reasonable observer to conclude that the government either places Christianity above other faiths or views being American and Christian as the same, or both. So that was their ruling. Okay. So in the process, the Fourth Circuit Court used as one of the examples of how they were ruling what is called the Lemon Test. This goes back to a case back in 1971, which said back then that you should, if indeed you are going to rule that something is constitutional and realize that indeed we don't want to prevent an establishment of religion, then those particular pieces of religious artifacts, whatever they might be, number one, have to have a secular purpose. Number two, have a primary effect that neither advances nor inhibits religion. By 1984, the court also added that a reasonable observer would conclude that the government is not endorsing a religion. What this has led to, if you listen to us at any length of time, is insanity. First of all, it's led to the idea that in order for us to have a nativity creche, a menorah, any kind of a cross, a Star of David, whatever it might be, in something that would be considered a public place, we would have to make sure that it would have some kind of secular purpose to celebrate Christmas. It would have to look like it was not primarily religious. So it gets to the point where, do we have enough rain? Do we have Santa Claus and reindeer and Frosty the Snowman next to a nativity scene so we can say, well, it's just a holiday celebration? And more importantly, it's just led to all sorts of silly kinds of arguments that are even hard to maintain with a straight face. And it's led to a great deal of confusion, which has caused mayors and city council and all sorts of others to say, we don't know what's constitutional and what isn't constitutional. So that's why in this particular case, Kelly Shackelford and his staff and those arguing the case have said, we need to not only declare that the cross in Bladensburg, Maryland is constitutional, we really need to get rid of what's called the Lemon Test. Now, they stand on pretty strong ground with most of our conservative justices. For example, Justice Clarence Thomas and the late Justice Antonin Scalia urged the court for some time to reject these Lemon Test standards. And as a matter of fact, they even noted in one particular denial that the prevailing analytical tool for assessing the establishment cause challenges and misstates the law. So the real question is, in this particular case, which goes by the name American Legion versus the American Humanist Association, I love the title, if nothing else. Which side are you on? The American Legion and those who want to support those who died for our freedom, or the American Humanist Association? Even though I've developed some kind of relationship and done some debates with humanists over the years, I think most Americans know which side they want to actually rule on. So the question before the court is simply this. Will they declare the cross constitutional? Pretty sure of that. I think we can depend on 5, let's hope more than 5 votes on that issue. But the bigger issue is, will they decide to overturn the so-called Lemon test and go back to the reasonable kinds of tests that have been used in the past? Because before 1971, we did have all sorts of ways in which we could determine whether something was constitutional or unconstitutional. And the argument in the piece that I've posted here for you to read is simply that with the new justices, that would be Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, there's a 5-vote majority to overturn the Lemon test and really lay out some clear legal guidelines. On the other side, you could recognize that the Chief Justice John Roberts, in more than one occasion, has sometimes even sided with the liberals, or may want to coax a couple of liberal justices to join in what could be just a narrow ruling that leaves Lemon alive. And so we won't hear how the vote goes, but the moment I hear that it was 7-2, I'm almost sure that, well, it's just going to be a narrow ruling that says, okay, the cross can stay, but Lemon test is still there. If I hear that it's 5-4, that probably tells me that the Lemon test is history. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a background. And again, if you've been praying, I would hope that you would also pray, because they get together and decide right now what they're going to do, and then over the next couple of months write their opinions, which probably won't come down till June, but when that opinion comes down, we'll spend some time talking about what that means for the future. And if nothing else, I hope that it is getting rid of the Lemon test so that we can get back to some very sensible kinds of ways to evaluate what's religious and what is not. Let's take a break, though, and if you have some comments about religious liberty, do you think that a cross in Maryland is unconstitutional? Or do you, like me, feel like it has been just a tremendous amount of time, effort, and work to simply come to a conclusion that should have been made a long time ago, both not only by the district court, but by the Fourth Circuit Court, that this case should never have even gone to the Supreme Court? I'd love to hear your comments. 1-800-351-1212. We come back. Those of you watching the whole issue of Second Amendment, we've got some new gun control legislation making its way through the House of Representatives onto the Senate. We'll see what happens with that and give you some perspective on that as well right after these important messages. Stay tuned.
Question, do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about MediShare.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With MediShare, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with MediShare. And they actually like MediShare more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of MediShare.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less, and they like it more. No wonder MediShare is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, that number is 1-800-351-1212. Let's just mention that, of course, we've heard the testimony from Michael Cohen. We've talked a little bit about the Supreme Court oral arguments. Tomorrow is our weekend edition. Penna Dexter will be with me, and we'll see if we can try to sort out a few more of these very important issues. And when we look at that, maybe we can get back into what did not happen in Hanoi. There was some skepticism as to whether or not there would be any kind of breakthrough, and there was not. The president, Donald Trump, basically walked away. Kim Jong-un is not going to move. I don't see how you can bring about any significant change. I agree with the National Intelligence Director, Dan Coates, to say there's really no way you can imagine how North Korea would give up their nuclear weapons, because it's their bargaining chip. It's the thing that maybe assures that there would not be regime change, because if you did not have nuclear weapons, is it possible that someone might actually go into North Korea, whether the United States or Russia, China, whatever, to begin to change the horrible situation that we find there? And so the president walked away. It's not the first time. You might remember President Ronald Reagan walked away at Reykjavik. He and Mikhail Gorbachev didn't agree, and everybody saw that as a failure. I think that was the start of the decline of the Soviet Union. But nevertheless, we'll play out what is happening. Maybe we'll learn some more, but I didn't expect a lot to come from that, simply because we want to try to denuclearize North Korea. I don't see that they have any interest in doing so, and they may even come to the, I think, reasonable conclusion from a sad point of view, but nevertheless a realistic point of view, that that's one of the few things that allows them to be part of the national and international discussion, which would not exist if the Hermit Kingdom did not have a nuclear weapon. And it, I think, illustrates exactly why Iran wants a nuclear weapon. But if you have some thoughts about that, or about some of the things we've covered in terms of religious liberty, or about the testimony by Michael Cohen, give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. But I did want to look at Congress, because from time to time we do look at some of these Second Amendment issues. And the House of Representatives yesterday did pass a bill that would require all would-be gun buyers, including those who wish to enter into private transactions, to undergo a federal criminal background check. This is called the Bipartisan Background Checks Act. It would require that prospective gun owners submit to a background check, even if this was gifted. For example, if I have a firearm that I wanted to give to my son or daughter, that alone would require me to get a background check, even for my daughter or son, even though I know them. And, of course, from anyone purchasing one from a private seller, which is oftentimes called the gun show loophole. But again, whether they're sold at a gun show or somewhere else, it's quite easy that if you wanted to sell it to someone else, you can do so, but don't have to go through a background check. It was passed 240 to 190. You had, of course, Democrats voting for it. You had also 8 Republicans. And so this is an attempt to move the legislation to the Senate. Will that get the requisite number of 60 votes in the Senate? Probably not. But you don't know. In this day and age, maybe this one will be seen as a reasonable action. But let's again bring to the conversation a couple of things that I think by now you would probably know. That is, first of all, it's been proposed that this would prevent mentally ill Americans from purchasing guns. It would also reduce mass shootings. Okay, that's what Representative Jerry Nadler said. Okay, let's take that on. We, and even in our own family, have had 2 occasions, one where individuals who had access to guns, we made sure that those guns were locked away and not available to somebody who was dealing with depression. In another case, in our extended family, had an individual that had mental issues who was able to obtain a gun which again has now been locked away, of course, but did not and did go through a background check and would have passed, because unless we have, and basically at that point, I don't think there had even been any counseling taking place. So even though there was depression, even though there might have been the idea that this is something I need someday in order to end my life if things get really bad, there wasn't anything, even though that person went through a background check, to flag that individual. And again, if you assume that this would reduce mass shootings, the question that we oftentimes ask around this table is simply this. Given the fact that one of those mass shootings took place in California, which is at the very top of the list in terms of the kinds of requirements that are necessary for a person to purchase a gun of any sort, what additional things could we possibly do that would have prevented that one? And even in the shooting in Nevada next door, when these guns are actually obtained in a legal manner, what are the belief that this is going to be even useful in preventing some of those? At the same time, of course, you also know the other argument about this. You can have all the background checks you want, but if an individual is a criminal, that criminal is not going to be going through background checks. That criminal is going to get guns in other ways. And so those of us that are law-abiding go through the background checks. I've done this many times myself, and I'm glad to do it if that would possibly be effective. There just isn't a whole lot of evidence that indeed that it would be. So what's the kind of the counter argument? And I thought I would, just before we take a break, mention that. That comes from Representative Steve Scalise. Many of you may remember him. First of all, he's a representative from the state of Louisiana. But more importantly, he's the one that sustained life-threatening injuries after being shot when he was at a practice for the annual congressional baseball game. That was 2 years ago. So I would love to hear his comments. And, of course, there are some videos out right now. He's actually produced a video that was distributed by the National Rifle Association. And he argued that that bill that was just passed in the House would jeopardize lawful gun owners' ability to trade or gift their firearms. And again, the example I use is even giving it to your child or getting a gun from your father or grandfather would have to go through the background check. So that's the first argument that is being made. The other is, in order for this to really be effective, you probably would have to have a gun registry. The argument that is made by the supporters and the proponents of this legislation is, oh, no, we won't keep a national gun registry. But if you start getting into the details, which I can get into if you're interested, sooner or later, probably sooner rather than later, you would have a national gun registry. And again, the question I put on the table is, would you, like the federal government or bureaucrats of the federal government, know which guns you have in your gun locker? And that's another issue as well. So if you say, well, wait a minute, are there alternatives? Steve Scalise also has that as well, because he's been proposing and actually encouraging support of a bill that was voted on or supposed to be voted on today. I haven't followed the legislative history, H.R. 112. And what that would do is actually provide the FBI with more time to complete a background check on a gun buyer. Under the current law, a gun retailer can make the sale if they've not heard back from the FBI regarding a purchaser's background check within 3 days. So the House is expected to vote on it today. I'll give you an update in the next day or two what happened there. But again, it's just another attempt to say, even if we're going to have background checks, let's do it in a way that makes some sense in terms of common sense. And, of course, that just, again, gives you a little bit of a feel for this whole issue of the Second Amendment. So if anyone thought that Second Amendment battles are over, I think we just found out yesterday and maybe even today that they're still around. Whether either of those pieces of legislation make their way through the United States Senate, I don't know. And whether or not the president would sign them, I don't know either. But I just thought we would bring that up real quickly so that you'd be up to date on a couple of pieces of legislation making its way through Congress. And you probably haven't heard anything about it except here on Point of View, because everybody's been focused on Michael Cohen or maybe even North Korea. and hardly anything on what is happening in Congress day to day. When we come back, I want to talk about the Senate just briefly, because another good piece. If Democrats end the filibuster, it could break American politics. Both sides will get a free shot, and David French argues that's a problem, especially when you start talking about some of these pieces of legislation we've just postponed and talked about here on the program. So let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about something else now being proposed by the Democratic leadership, being proposed even by some presidential candidates in the Democratic Party. So we'll talk about that right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Riley Bembry returned from World War I, a changed man. Upon his return, this former Army medic settled in Los Angeles and became a butcher. But the city could not contain him, and he headed into the Mojave Desert and became a prospector. By the time the Great Depression gripped the nation, other veterans of the Great War had found their way to Bembry's cabin, each seeking to escape the emotional and physical scars left from the war. Together in 1934, they erected a simple 7-foot monument atop a rocky outcropping not far from Bembry's cabin, but miles and miles from anything else. They chose a common symbol to honor war dead, a white cross, and dedicated it to honor the dead of all wars. When Bembry died in 1984, Henry Sandoz, Bembry's close friend, began to care for the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial Cross. In 2001, someone sued. A judge would eventually order the memorial hidden from view, literally covered with a padlocked bag, while the case was decided. First Liberty had the privilege of working with Henry Sandoz, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and others to defend that memorial. Before he was senator, Ted Cruz volunteered his time as lead counsel on the case. Because of Henry Sandoz, Ted Cruz, Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and First Liberty, that memorial still stands today just where Bembry placed it in honor of the dead of all wars. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's head to Missouri for just a minute. KNEO. Michael, what's on your mind?
I had just a quick question on the background checks for the gun ownership and sale. Given the fact that a number of the recent mass shootings have involved a theological component in the motivation, would the background check be looking for those issues as well?
Theoretically not. Realistically, possibly. Now, theoretically, no, because you're not supposed to be involved in those issues. But, okay, as a person who's become very familiar with hate crimes lately, people listing as hate crimes, some of those are seen as anti-Islamic. anti-gay, anti-black, whatever. So the religious, the religious component could be a factor, but right now it is primarily, do you have, for example, a felony? Do you have a restraining order for domestic abuse? So the theoretically, no. Realistically, in the future, could that happen? This was the question that was raised back when Bill Clinton was president, because his attorney general, Janet Reno, began to produce things talking about some of these dangerous groups. And the suggestion is that even some of these kind of redneck kind of groups could be kind of dangerous. Would that create a actual file that could be used by the FBI to determine whether or not you could have access to those? One would hope no. Realistically, if you have, as I'm going to talk about in just a minute, a Democratic president, a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and maybe even a very favorable FBI, maybe those kinds of things might be listed in those that would be required for background checks. So in the near term, not a chance. In the long term, it's a possibility, don't you think?
Could be, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be necessarily, but the combination of mental illness, suggestibility, the demands of some of the religious organizations that are out there to not question the authorities and so forth, I can see that as being a very valid issue. Definitely an invasion of privacy, an invasion of the First Amendment right to practice religion, but there's a lot of components in there that could go really haywire given the wrong leadership.
There you go. And again, it just depends on which list. I mean, there are groups right now. PayPal the other day just said, we're going to follow the Southern Poverty Law Center list. Okay, that means that we wouldn't allow PayPal to be used by the American Family Association or Alliance Defending Freedom or a variety of other groups. We're going to have Dr. Frank Wright on Monday, and they are involved in a lawsuit which is not only against the Southern Poverty Law Center, but also against Amazon, because their particular group, D. James Kennedy Ministries, is listed as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. That's bad enough. But then, because it's listed, Amazon uses that to determine whether or not you can participate in the Amazon Smile program that they have. So they have a lawsuit right now, which is against both the Southern Poverty Law Center and Amazon. Now, again, this is all in the area of private transactions. None of this is being proposed as lists that would be determining whether or not you could pass a background check. But I think Michael's raised a very good question. Given what's happened already, is it reasonable to assume that possibly in the future that could happen? And I think that's possible. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No. But could happen, and I think you really raise a very good question. That brings me to the other key point. This background check probably will not pass the Senate unless we get rid of the filibuster. And that's why the other article I've posted here today is very significant, because what you've had is already an individual by the name of Harry Reid, who at that time was the Senate Majority Leader, ended a filibuster for judicial nominees. So is it just a matter of time before the filibuster will be eliminated by the next Democrats that control the United States Senate? And if you think that that's a totally speculative argument, again, the piece here that we've got by David French quotes from Jamel Bouie, I think is how that is pronounced, which talks about the need to come out against the filibuster, who actually says, we are long past the days of large bipartisan majorities for ambitious, far-reaching legislation. Just 3 Republican senators backed in 2009 stimulus, and not one voted for the Affordable Care Act. Criticals say this as evidence that these laws were too liberal, but in truth it reflects a structural change in American politics. I agree. The parties are polarized and ideologically coherent, offer fundamentally different visions for the direction of the country. Again, I would agree. Then goes on to say that a President Cory Booker, or Klobuchar, or, you can go through the whole list of those that are talking about there, could seek a Republican support for their agendas, but they won't likely find it. The legislative fast of their policies, to say nothing of a Green New Deal or university child care, will go entirely through the Democrat Party. So the argument is let's just recognize that we are too polarized and too divided to enact ambitious, far-reaching legislation. Probably true. I think I could agree with that. So then the argument in this article that appeared in the New York Times looks at those facts and says, well, then let's step on the gas and let's actually go as quickly as we can so that we can achieve what we want to do. David French says we shouldn't step on the gas, we should tap the brakes. But we might then just get this fundamental swing in policies. And the example I thought was interesting that David French uses is gun control regimes could swing wildly from president to president. You could, for example, have one situation where this particular piece of legislation, the Bipartisan Background Check Act, passes, and then you have a Republican take control of the House and the Senate or the presidency, and it swings all the way back again. Although most of the time things in Washington, D.C. swing to the left, they rarely swing back to the right. There are a few examples of that. We're living in one of those right now, and I would not have guessed that. But nevertheless, the point that he makes in the chart, which you can see, is that if you compare how Republicans and Democrats actually fit along a mean. Let's look at, for example, how many Republicans were more conservative than the median Democrat. Well, it was just 64% back in 1994. It's 95% now. Let's look at the other way. How many Democrats are more liberal than the median Republican? Back in 1974, about 70%, now 97%. So you can see this remarkable shift both to the left and to the right. And so as a result, we no longer have kind of this bell-shaped curve. We have what looks like a U curve instead. And so again, as David French ends, he said, lest we despair of ever enacting meaningful reform, let's not forget that patient and persistent public advocacy can still work. Just recently, Congress passed criminal justice reform with huge bipartisan majorities, an important change that was politically unthinkable not long ago. So the point is, let's hope we don't have an end to the filibuster, but if a Democratic president is elected and Democrats control the House and Senate, I think it's a foregone conclusion, which is why we posted that article for you to look at today. Well, we have a lot more to cover, but the good news is we will cover it tomorrow on our weekend edition. If you want to know more about any of the guests that we've had on the program, all available at our website, pointofview.net. Hope you'll go there as well and find out a little bit more about our trip to Israel. I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow, right here on Point of View.
Roadside Attractions presents Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question.
It's all part of his plan, right?
God does love you. He loves you like crazy.
From executive producers Tim Tebow and Robbie Tebow, Run the Race. Rated PG, parental guidance suggested. Now playing. More information is available at runtheracemovie.com.
Jesus said you could find a person's heart by where they invest their money. We at Point of View could not be more thankful that so many demonstrate a love for truth and for this nation by investing in our common mission. Of course, the reality is our team, our truth team, is a small percentage of those who listen. And right now, as they say in sports, we could use a deeper bench. For those who have given, thank you. And if you haven't made that step yet, take one now. Go to pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Show your heart for our future. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.